Okay, welcome everyone. This is the April Data and Performance Management Committee meeting. Thanks for joining. If you haven't already, please enter your name into or your agency name into the chat box so we know who is participating. Today we wanted to talk about agency setup review in HMIS. And we also wanted to talk about the permanent supportive housing and other permanent housing project performance reports that we are releasing this month. So first, agency setup review. So this is something that we've been wanting to implement for a little while now, but it is an opportunity for the agencies to see the data that we have in HMIS, not necessarily client data, but about your projects and how they're set up. And so this review includes program descriptor data elements, funding sources, and bed inventory. Program descriptor data elements include information about your projects, like the project type, where the project is located, the target population, that kind of information. Funding sources are how each of your projects are being funded, and where that funding is coming from, if it's COC funding or ESG, SSVF, there's a variety of different funding sources. And then bed inventory. So this is information on how many beds your project has for homeless clients by household type. And it also includes beds for veterans or chronically homeless or youth. So this information is collected in HMIS, and it is really important because it impacts a lot of the reports we do, like the project performance reports, as well as the LSA, the HIC and PIT. Almost every report that we release that goes to HUD is impacted by how this data is set up in HMIS. I would say every report that we submit to HUD. So it's critical that this information is correct in HMIS and kept up to date. Keeping this information up to date will also help when we get to these reporting times, like the HIC and PIT and the LSA. The more up to date and correct this information is, the less we will need from you in order to complete these reports. So we want to implement this review for the agencies so that they can look at this regularly and work with us to make sure we have what we need. So just to kind of show you what the data looks like, we are going to be releasing a dashboard to the agencies that includes all of this data. There's 3 different charts on the dashboard, so that's what I'm going to show you now. The first is the program descriptor data, so you can see they're just basic Excel charts, but it will include a separate row for each of your projects. So you see here, this is agency 1 and project 1 and 2, and you'll be able to see the project types, target population, site information, if it's a housing project, what type, if it's participating in HMIS, since we do include all agencies in the COC that have housing beds, not just those that are in HMIS. And then our operating start date and end date. So this would populate with all of the projects at your agency. You would be able to review this data. The next set of data is funding sources. So again, each project will have a separate row. It could also have multiple rows if the project has multiple active funding sources. So you'll be able to see the amount if it's in there, where the funding source is coming from, and then grant identifier, start date and end date, that type of information. And then the third component of data is looking at bed inventory, like I mentioned. So each project is a separate row, and also each household type is a certain row. So you'll see for project 1 here, we have beds for households with children as well as beds for households without children. And information on the bed inventories, how many beds, how many units, and if they're non-dedicated or dedicated to different subpopulations, that will be in here as well. So this is what will be included on the dashboard. And what I wanted to discuss with the group is what's the best way to engage the agencies with this. So first I'm going to do a little poll and then we can talk about it. So let me do the poll really quick. Okay, so I just released the poll. The first question is, what is the best way to engage agencies to review and update their agency setup data in HMIS? Is it reminders during the user meetings? Is it email reminders, review during the audits? Or if you have another idea and would like to share, please do that also. The second question, and for the first question, you can multi-select if you would like. The second question, what else do you need to effectively review your agency setup in HMIS? Is it recorded training that goes over the details of all those data elements that I just showed you? Is it written instructions? Is it a review with someone on the HMIS team? Is it something else that I haven't listed here? Or do you have what you need as long as we give you this dashboard? So take a minute to fill out these 2 questions and then we can discuss, or if you have thoughts already that you want to discuss, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
I love that you're doing this, actually. This is really, really helpful. I wish all COCs would do this, actually.
That's good to hear, honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really validating when you put a bunch of like work into something and then someone actually thinks that they would use it. No, I like this a lot because, you never know, like, I mean, if something predates you, like if it's still accurate, I think it'll like set us up a little bit better for the housing inventory as well. So that'll be really good. But yeah, I mean, I think the options that you had in your poll were pretty good. I think just having access to this will be, really helpful, I think.
All right, thank you, Cassie. Anybody else have thoughts that they want to share? Is there anything missing from these 3 charts? I didn't put this as a poll, but is there anything missing from these 3 charts that would be helpful to include also as you review your setup?
Can you move to like, can you click between?
Oh yeah. So this is bed inventory. This is funding sources. And then the program descriptor data.
Okay. This is pretty thorough. I mean, this just really looks like the information that's on the HIC answer form anyway. So I think this is really good.
Okay. So I was looking at the poll, it got interrupted. So let me deal with that really quick. However, so I was looking at the poll and it was a pretty even distribution across everything I listed pretty much. So the first question was, what is the best way to engage agencies to review and update set of data in HMIS? There was a variety of responses across the three. So reminders during user meetings, email reminders, and review during the audits. I didn't see if anyone selected I have another idea, but if you do, please unmute yourself and you can share, or also you can put it in the chat if you have other ideas for how we can engage the agencies. And then same thing for the second question, what else do you need to effectively review your agency setup in HMIS? We got a lot of responses for recorded training, written instructions, and review with the HMIS staff. I didn't see any that said nothing, access to the dashboard is enough. But if anyone has any ideas on either of those questions, how to engage agencies or what you need to do this review, I'll hold on a minute in case anybody wants to contribute to that. All right, the next kind of leading into what Cassie mentioned before is the HICP submission. So I also wanted to talk with the group a little bit about how you submit your data. So let me see if my poll is working again. It is not, which is very sad, but I can talk through the questions with everyone. So what I'm showing here is similar to, or this is another idea we have for how we can collect your data as part of your HICP submission. If you are not sure what I'm talking about right now, the HIC is the housing inventory chart and the PIT is the point in time count that we conduct on an annual basis for housing projects in Orange County that target homeless clients. And the point in time is a count of the clients active in emergency shelters or transitional housing projects. So historically, we have collected this data in spreadsheets, kind of similar to what I just showed you here, except it's much longer. And each project is a row and you submit all your data. This is another possible format we could use. The thing about this format is it would be one, so like this whole visualization here would represent one project. And so you would have to, open a new form for each project you have at your agency and complete this information again. Whereas if you use a spreadsheet, it's one document, each project is a row, and you submit all of your data. So we want your feedback on which of those is better for you. And so the first question I have is, how could the HIC and sheltered PIT process be improved for your agency? So the options I put here, so if you want to either share in the chat box or unmute yourself, that's fine. Some options I had were streamlining the data submission process, meeting with the HMIS team to complete data submissions, pre-populating a form or spreadsheet with your agency's HMIS data. Nothing, everything was great. Or if you have another idea of how we can improve the HIC and PIT submission process, you can let me know or put it in the chat. And the other question was, how would you prefer to submit your data? Do you like the spreadsheet format that we have been using? Would you prefer this type of format where it's more of a single form for each project? Or if you have another idea, you can share that also. All right, Adriana put in the chat, meeting with the HMIS team would be helpful to improve the HICP process, and pre-populating a form or spreadsheet with your current HMIS data would be helpful. And her vote was for a single form for each project. Anybody else have thoughts?
I mean, I just feel like I've been doing it the same way every year, and I feel like it gets easier and easier every year. So, I mean, for me, it's pretty simple, but not to say that I didn't have to go back and forth with, you know, your team a little bit, but I think, I don't know, either way.
Okay.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, it's Adriana. So I was just going to comment that for my second response, single form for each project probably would eliminate the need for pre-populating on a spreadsheet, and also might even reduce the need for meeting with the HMIS team, because based on the little I guess, example that you provided with that form, yeah, exactly. It looks like there would be like limited room for error. So that might be easier, but this is actually my first time doing it. So, you know,
How'd it go?
well, I love that your team was available for me to answer my questions. So that's why I'm saying meeting with the team was helpful for me. But if the goal is to be more efficient and reduce the number of meetings, probably a form like this would be helpful.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Not that I didn't enjoy meeting with your team. I just assume that your team is super busy and can't meet with everybody.
Okay, thanks. And I put the questions up here. It's not as cool as having a poll, but you can see the questions that I was asking and the answer options if you would want to contribute.
You know what? I'm looking at this, and you guys used to do pre-populated forums, and this year we didn't have, well, at least our agency, we didn't have a pre-populated form. I feel like that used to be how you did it. Am I wrong?
We did do that in the past. So this year we tried doing reports from HMIS instead of pre-populating the HIC answer form because we thought it would be similar, and it turns out that's not true. So
Yeah,
yes, you're correct.
yeah, I missed a program because it didn't show up on the, because there were no clients in it. So
Okay. Yeah.
But the pre-populated form was nice because a lot of times that information, like bed inventory on shelters and things like that, don't necessarily change if you keep it year after year. And you know, all of the information is, but I mean, if you're working for a large agency that has a lot of different shelters, sometimes things can get missed because you're just literally looking over like old data. But I don't know, pre-populating might be nice as long as we're doing this, you know, now that we have what you've just presented to us prior to this slide, it might be a little bit easier if we were to be, you know, if we were to have those type of like check-ins on bed inventory like throughout the year, and then a pre-populated form during HIC, I guess maybe that would work.
Okay. I also got feedback from Andrea. This was her first year filling it out. She would prefer pre-populating and a single form for each project. Okay, thanks, Andrea. Anyone else have thoughts that they want to share on the process, how we can improve the Hick and Pit for you in the future? I'll put this up again, just if anyone joined and missed it. So this is another way we can collect the Hick data, Hick and Pit data. If we have a single form for a project, you could do it this way. The only concern I had with this, or the main concern, is that if you have like 30 projects, which is the case for some agencies, I don't know if this is more tedious than having like a spreadsheet like this, but so that's why we wanted your feedback as well. So
And that's exactly why I vote against the single form for each project, because right now at CityNet, we had like, what, 2, but at Mercy House, we had like, I don't know, like
40.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 25. So it was a lot. It was a lot of work. So the spreadsheet at Mercy House was great. But, you know, I guess I really shouldn't have much say, as we don't have very many shelter programs. So it's up to the bigger agencies, I would say. I don't mind filling out 2 separate forms, you know.
Okay.
If it's a lot easier for the other agencies. I don't know.
Okay. Does anybody else have thoughts on the Hick and Pit before we move on? All right, I am going to move on to the permanent supportive housing and other permanent housing project performance reports. Let me pull that up really quick. So we have not sent these out to the agencies yet. As you can imagine, we are doing our best over here. We're very close. They should go out probably today, but they have not gone out yet. So as usual, we have a project scores report, and then we have the goals and outcomes. The project scores report will list each project participating in HMIS, or if it's a DV project, they may also be included. And across the top are the different goals that we are looking at as part of this report. And then so you can see how your projects are doing for each measure. For those of you that are receiving COC funds for permanent supportive housing, these measures will be used as part of the ranking criteria in the upcoming NOFA. And these scores are what we will be using for your agency. The COC board has not yet decided on if we're using all of these measures or if we're only using some of these measures, but whatever scores you have on this report are what we will be looking at for your agency and how you will be ranked as part of the NOFA process. So when we do release the reports, please review your data. If there are data entry issues in HMIS, we are not republishing the report for those type of issues because the agencies already had the opportunity to review and correct their data. But if you think that any of the scores on here are incorrect, and something was calculated incorrectly, you can definitely let us know and we'll review that. So please check on these reports when they are published. All right. So we do have some new measures today as well, so I'm going to go over those. But we usually start with the summary of the project as a whole, so we can see how we're performing for each measure over time. For goal 1, entries from literal homelessness, we had a slight decline this past reporting period. And I suspect the reason is because we have had many new projects join HMIS, and there's still kind of getting up and running and figuring everything out. So I anticipate that is why there's been some decline in a couple of these measures. So I don't think this is a long-term thing or a trend that will necessarily continue through the reports. For goal 4, we were just above our threshold of 30 days with 32. Goal 4 is looking at how many days it is taking a household to be placed in a housing unit. Goal 5 is looking at ensuring that projects are fully utilized. So if a project has a certain number of beds or units, are there clients that are staying in those beds or units? You can see we're above our threshold at 119%. And the reason that's so high is because we have multiple voucher projects in Orange County, and it's possible for those projects to serve more clients than the number of vouchers that they were awarded, which can make their utilization high. Goal 6 is looking at adults that increased their income while they were enrolled in the project. You can see we've remained pretty consistent there, just under our threshold of 65%. Goal 7 is looking at adults that increased their income by the time they exited the project. We did have a little bit of a decrease there, but as I mentioned, I think that's because of new projects coming on. We'll go into a little bit more detail on this in a minute. Goal 9 is looking at clients stabilized in permanent housing. We are still above our threshold of 93%. We've had a slight dip, but we're pretty consistent overall. And goal 10 is looking at clients that return to the homeless system after being housed. And we've had a little bit of an increase, but not a lot. And we are just above our threshold for that one. And we do have 4 new measures that were discussed in February. And the thresholds for these measures were created during that meeting as well. So since they're new measures, we don't have data over time yet, so it's just 1 bar, but the next time we pull this data, there will be additional data on here. And these new measures are also in place for rapid rehousing projects. So as a reminder, next month we'll be doing rapid rehousing and be looking at this data also. So if you have any rapid rehousing projects that are COC funded, please plan to attend that meeting. Goal 11 is looking at projects that are receiving referrals from the coordinated entry system. I'll go a little bit more into detail on what that looks like in a minute also. But our threshold we set to 100% because we want all clients to be referred to permanent supportive housing projects from the coordinated entry system. This past reporting period, it was only about 56%. Goal 12 is looking at limiting the referrals from the coordinated entry system that are denied by housing providers. We wanted the threshold for this to be less than or equal to 40%, and as a project type, we scored 45%, so we were just over that threshold. For goal 13, is looking at accepting matches from the coordinated entry system quickly. So less than or equal to 45 days is our threshold, and as a project type, we were at 65 days. And goal 14, we're looking at the percentage of matches to housing opportunities that were successful. So the threshold is we want at least 50% of them to be successful, and right now we are at 43%. So again, I'll go into the details on these, how they're calculated in a minute. But I just wanted to give the overview first. So the first measure is looking at head of households that entered a permanent supportive housing or other permanent housing project from a homeless situation. So ideally, we want all clients to be entering from homeless situations to ensure that the most vulnerable are being served. As a project type, we scored 88%. And you can see how we're doing for the different subpopulations. For the clients that did not enter from homeless situations, 39% of them came from permanent housing. And we do right now allow clients to be entering from permanent housing if the prior permanent housing was within 14 days of their new enrollment. So the reason that is sometimes a client is placed in a permanent supportive housing project and it's not a good fit for them for whatever reason. So they move to another project within the agency, or in some cases, they even move to another agency, which is okay and allowed. But in order to track that in HMIS, the enrollment dates should line up. So when the enrollment in the first project ends, so the exit date should be the same as the project start date in the new project, because there shouldn't be any gap in the clients being served. It should be back to back. And the prior living situation is a permanent housing project. So for these pink clients, what's likely the issue is the number of days between their exit and their new enrollment are not on the same day. There's probably a gap of more than 2 weeks. So we encourage the agencies to look at that in their data. The next most common entry was missing data. So client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected. This should be information that the agency can collect, even if maybe they're struggling to get it initially from the client. They can always go back and ask them again if the client didn't want to provide it or whatever. But the client should know where they were staying before they came to your project. So we also encourage the agencies to look at these clients when you're reviewing your data. The third most common was family or friends. So the client was staying with family or friends before they entered their project. And then temporary situations like a hotel paid for by the client. And then institutional settings like a hospital or a jail. Goal 4 is looking at the number of days it takes to place the client in a housing unit. So it's the number of days between the project start date and the housing move-in date. And you can see again for the subpopulations how each of them are performing individually. And the bar chart is showing how many enrollments fell into each of these categories. So 285 enrollments were meeting the threshold of 30 days or less. That's about 67% of all the enrollments. And then 38 enrollments were between 31 and 60 days, and 105 enrollments were 61 plus days. Goal 5 is looking at unit utilization. So what percentage of the units you have are filled. For permanent supportive housing, this is usually an easy measure to meet because of how vouchers are tracked, like I mentioned before. And in the bar chart, you could see the number of projects with utilization below 65%, between 65 and 105, and over 105. 56% of all the projects are between 65 and 105%, which is kind of considered normal by HUD standards, even though our threshold as a COC is 95%. Goal 6 is looking at adults that increase their income while enrolled in the project. As a project type, our score was 60%. You can see the subpopulation again. Some of them are a little bit under the project type score. And the donut is showing us the income status of all of the clients that were included in this measure. So 60% of clients had an increase in their income, so that's reflecting the project score. 17% had a decrease in income, so the income at enrollment was more than their income at the latest update in HMIS. 14% maintained their income, and 9% had no income. So the income reported at entry was 0, and the income reported at their latest update was also 0. So again, for the agencies in particular, we recommend that you review the no income clients, because since this is permanent supportive housing, this is one of the things that most permanent supportive housing projects are looking at. So it may be an issue with data entry that a change in income wasn't entered into HMIS. And keep in mind that change in income also includes a cost of living raise. So like if you're getting disability or some other type of funding like that, and they give a cost of living increase to the clients, which happens sometimes, that should also be recorded in HMIS. And that would be counted as increased income for your clients. Goal 7 is looking at the same data, but for clients that, or adults that exited during the reporting period. And so again, you can see 34% of clients had an increase in income, another 32% maintained their income, 18% had no income, and 16% had a decrease. So the same logic kind of applies. Just in particular, look at that no income amount, since that is kind of one of the things that most PSH and OPH projects are looking at. Goal 9 is stabilizing clients in permanent housing. So this means that the client is active in a permanent housing project and has a housing move-in date, or if they exit the project to a permanent housing situation, that's also considered stabilizing the client. This is usually an easy measure to meet for our COC, because permanent supportive housing by nature is meant to be long-term for clients and not necessarily have an exit date. So as long as the client's active in the project and has a housing move-in date, then you're meeting the measure. So it's usually a fairly easy measure to meet. For those clients that were not stabilized in permanent housing, in this case, they were clients that exited to non-permanent destinations. Most returned to homeless situations. Some 26 went to missing information, so the data wasn't collected, or the client refused to share, or an exit interview wasn't completed. That's all missing. 13 went to temporary situations, like a hotel or with friends or family temporarily. And 2 went to institutional settings like a hospital or jail. Goal 10 is looking at clients that re-enter the homeless system after exiting to permanent housing. So there's usually not a lot of data for permanent supportive housing and other permanent housing projects for this measure, because there's not a lot of exits from these projects. But for those that did return, you can see the different project types that they are returning to. So 54% return to permanent supportive housing or other permanent housing. Again, this is related to goal 1 that I mentioned earlier. This is probably due to an error with either the client's exit date from the first enrollment or the entry date with the second enrollment. Because if it's within 14 days, if they're within 14 days of each other, that would not be counted as a return. So those clients would not be showing up here. So again, review that data and make sure that's accurate for your clients. 26% of clients returned to an emergency shelter and 17% returned to street outreach. That makes sense because that is usually where clients show up first when they do become homeless. And then 1 client returned to rapid rehousing. It is possible that is true, but it is more likely that there might be an issue with entry and exit dates again. So that's something to review also. Types or timeline of returns to the homeless system. So after the client exits to a permanent housing location, how long is it taking them to return to the homeless system? Most of the clients are returning within 6 months. 13 are returning from 6 months to 1 year, and only 2 returned from 1 to 2 years after their exit. So in most cases, if the client can get through those first 6 months, they're more likely to not return to the homeless system. All right, so now I want to get into our new measures. Goal 11 is looking at referrals from the coordinated entry system. So of the new enrollments that a project entered during the reporting period, what percentage of them were referrals from coordinated entry? So we again want this we want all referrals to be coming from coordinated entry to ensure that the most vulnerable clients are receiving the housing that they need. And also keep in mind for COC and ESG funded projects, it is a requirement to receive referrals from coordinated entry. Except for if you're a DV project, those projects are not included in coordinated entry right now. So in our chart here, you can see how our COC funded versus non-COC funded projects are performing. So really for the COC funded projects, this bar should be 100% connected referrals, meaning the referral came from coordinated entry. And we're close, but there's probably some data cleanup that needs to go on with some of the projects to increase this percentage. And then for non-COC funded projects, only about half of them are receiving referrals from the coordinated entry system. Ideally, this would also be 100%, but we're still working with the agencies to increase these percentages. But right now, we're only about half of the enrollments coming in are from coordinated entry. For goal 12, we're looking at the percentage of matched households that were denied by the housing provider. So as part of coordinated entry, the client has a choice in where they're housed and who they're housed with. So that is not what's being included in this measure. This measure is specifically looking at if a household was denied after they were matched to a housing opportunity, did the housing provider deny the client? So, and we want to limit that as much as possible because that can be traumatic for the clients if they think they're getting housing and then they don't. It also can cause inefficiencies in the system and make clients make their length of homelessness increase while they are matched and then denied and then matched again. So the donut here is looking at the reasons why a housing provider denied a household. 41% said other. 40% were inappropriate referrals. 11% were client denials. I'll go over that in a second. And then referral time expired was 7%, and denied by landlord or property manager was like 1%. And I think there was like 1 or 2 clients that were self-resolved. So the way the data is collected in HMIS, when a household is denied a referral, the user has to enter if it was denied by the housing provider or by the client. And so the user will select housing provider or client, and then they have to select the reason for the denial. So that's this information. And you'll see here, there's 45 clients that are client denial. So in this case, the user selected housing provider when they should have selected client. So that's data that the agency should review and work on improving, because these are hurting your data unnecessarily right now. I have a little slide for this also to give you some more context on some of these reasons for denial. So on the left side of the screen here, these are all of the options that are in HMIS right now for reasons for denial. And some of them were kind of rolled up into other categories. So client denials include client did not show up or call, client refused services, disagreement with the rules, needs could not be met by program, or falsification of documents. Those are all under that client denial category. Client out of jurisdiction, client previously received service, full capacity or no availability or lack of eligibility. Those are all inappropriate referrals. So that's how those are categorized on the report. I also wanted to show you, so if someone selects other for a denial reason, they also have to enter some details on that denial. And so, and this is a text box. So on the left side are the most common reasons for denial that I saw under the other text box. And so most of these should actually be associated with other reasons for denial. So a lot of users said non-compliance with requests for items or information. That should be disagreement with rules, since those are rules for the program that they don't want to provide that information. No contact with the client should be the client didn't show up or call. The housing opportunity was not available should be full capacity or no availability. The client denied should be client refused services. The voucher expired. I put it under full capacity or no availability, but I'm open to thoughts on that one. And the reason I chose that is just because if the voucher expired, it's no longer available for the client to use. So that's why I put it there. And then ineligible should be lack of eligibility. There's also a bunch that said incorrect referral. And this depends on why it was incorrect. If the client was ineligible, obviously it should go under lack of eligibility. If it's just a data entry thing, like the user chose this program, but they should have chose this other program, that incorrect referral should be deleted. because it didn't really occur. It was just a data entry error. But we would need more information on if there's other reasons why people are putting in incorrect referral. We would need more information on that to help assign to the correct reason for denial. All right, so I got a couple questions. New measures apply to RRH2? Yes. These new measures do apply to rapid rehousing projects. We will be going over them next month at the data meeting. You do have access to look at this data now in HMIS. If you run the project performance report for your project type, there are charts for these 4 new measures on there for both permanent supportive housing, other permanent housing, and then rapid rehousing. Another question, would it be a good idea to share the names of the agencies by name and their performance to the CES leads so they can work to see how to improve referrals? Yes, so they are on here. We could also share, if you wanted in another format, we can share that also, but you can see for each goal how each project performed. So you could do it that way, or if you want a list, we can share that with you also, Myra. All right, so in sum for this measure, there are some opportunities for data cleanup. So please look at those project performance reports as you get a minute to work on it, just to improve your data. Next measure is looking at how quickly matches are accepted. So it's counting the number of days between when the household was matched to a housing opportunity and when they were accepted. And in this case, accepted also means when the client was enrolled in the project. So this is looking at the average number of days. The reason we look at this measure is just to try to reduce the amount of time a household remains homeless, and also to make sure that they stay engaged, because the more time that passes, the less likely it might be that you can get a hold of the client or their circumstances may change. So trying to reduce that amount of time. And the bar chart here is just kind of grouping clients or households based on the number of days, how long it's taking them to be matched. Only 128 out of 463 enrollments are currently meeting the threshold. So it's around a quarter. Most are being accepted in the project between 46 and 90 days. So it's just working on decreasing that number as much as possible and reviewing eligibility, making sure the client is eligible and that they want to receive assistance from your agency, and then enrolling them in your project. The last measure is looking at successfully matching households to a housing provider. So of the referrals from the coordinated entry system to your project, how many were accepted? And the reason we look at this is just to increase the efficiency of the coordinated entry system as much as possible. We want to make sure that we are appropriately matching clients to housing opportunities that fit their need and that they're eligible for. Again, just to try and streamline the process, reduce how long someone is homeless, and just have an efficient system. So again, we have a breakdown of how COC funded projects versus non-COC funded projects are performing. And they're actually fairly close. COC funded projects are accepting referrals at a little bit of a higher rate, 51% compared to 41%. But they're in the same ballpark. Right now, our threshold is at least 50% of all matches are accepted. So COC funded projects are meeting it and non-COC funded projects are just below it. But ideally, this would obviously be much higher, just to increase that efficiency as much as possible. So that is all of the data I have on our report. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Anybody worried about the rapid rehousing one? Myra likes it. Yes, Myra. You're not the one being judged, Myra, so you don't have to be worried. All right, I'm just giving it one more minute to see if any questions or comments come in. Feel free to unmute yourself if you do want to share. If you haven't already, please enter your name into the enter your agency name into the chat box so we know who's participating. I always mess that up. Like I mentioned before, we will be releasing these reports hopefully today for all of the permanent supportive housing and other permanent housing projects. We wanted to get it out before the meeting, but we just didn't quite make it. So it'll be going out very shortly. We also will be publishing meeting minutes as well as the recording and the slides from this meeting on the website. And the next meeting is scheduled for May, just 1 second, May 12th, same time, 1:30. And we will be covering this same data, but for rapid rehousing projects. And the rest of the agenda will be released the week before during the user meeting. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to wrap up the meeting. Thank you all so much for attending, and we will see you next month.